Sprint Saturday takes centre stage in Spielberg as the world's fastest riders get ready to rumble at the short but fast roller coaster Red Bull Ring, surrounded by plush green countryside around an hour's drive from the bustling university city of Graz, who will be the star pupil over 14 nail-biting laps over tomorrow's Grand Prix of Austria. It's time for MotoGP. So the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, 11 corners, 4.34 kilometres, just over 2.7 miles in length. It's already been a record-breaking day here in the Styria Mountains after Jorge Martin blitzed his way to an all-time lap record of 1:27.748, securing the world champions leader and the Spaniard his 5th pole in the opening 11 Grand Prix. Pretty complicated to nail the perfect lap around this Spielberg circuit. Sector 1 includes the sharp climb up to the first corner, into the chicane 2A and 2B. Sector 2, hard braking into turn 3 and downhill into turn 4. Two of the 3 left-handers in sector 3, turns 6 and 7, before the lap completed by turns 9 and 10. Always drama down the years here in Austria at those 2 final corners. Heavy braking zones at 1, 2A and 4. Good overtaking opportunities though provided in those particular sections. Overtaking hot spots, well, there are plenty of them. Turn 1 into both chicanes, the turn 3, turn 9 and turn 10. This was Marc Marquez on Jack Miller into the chicane 1 year ago. So 2 weeks ago in our 75th anniversary celebrations in retro liveries, it was Enea Bastianini, the beast, at the double at the British Grand Prix in Silverstone. Jorge Martin hit the front ahead of world champion Pecco Bagnaia. Looked like he was making a victorious return after a dreadful Sachsenring Grand Prix in Germany before the summer break. But the beast, so good, so strong, and so fast on worn tyres, started his charge towards the front. A late mistake from Martin, you felt was immaterial. The race pace of Enea Bastianini, it was a magic performance in front of Harry Potter stars, as the beast drags himself into world championship contention. He starts from 7th place in the upcoming 14-lap Tissot Sprint. What a session it was in Q2 this morning, as Jorge Martin, overnight, some drama for the world champion leader. A rather bizarre injury he carries into the remaining action here in the Styria Mountains. He was having a shower in his motorhome with the paddock here last night. We're not quite sure what the cause was, but Jorge Martin has quite a nasty cut, a gash in his left thumb. We saw it heavily bandaged this morning, pre-FP2 and pre-qualifying. He was on a constant observation from MotoGP medic Dr. Angel Chartra. Didn't really hold up the Martinator though, did it, in a thrilling Q2 session, as the Prima Pramac Racing star powered to yet another pole position here in Austria. He was on the pole at the double in both 2021 races. Memorable weekend for Martin that weekend, of course, when he took his first ever MotoGP victory. It has been getting hotter and hotter after a rather cloudy and overcast start to Sprint Saturday. Once the cloud cover had burned off, well, the world's best riders have been burning some hot laps around this 4.3 kilometre Austrian circuit. We came back here, of course, in 2016, and it has been very much the domain of Ducati. 8 Grand Prix victories in 10. They won the first Tissot Sprint to take place in Austrian soil here 1 year ago, thanks to Pecco Bagnaia's brilliance. Bagnaia, though, will not be repeating last year's treble. Pole, the Tissot Sprint win and the Grand Prix win, denied pole position by nearly a tenth and a half. Breathtaking lap by Martin, that 1:27.748. Bagnaia hot on his coattails, only 2 riders, the top 2 in the World Championship, the top 2 riders really in the last 18 months or so in the MotoGP World Championship. Both of them in the 1:27s. A star-studded front row as well. What a mouth-watering prospect this is, with Martin and Bagnaia joined in the top 3 in Q2 by Marc Marquez. First time in 2024, the first time since they've locked horns together on Ducatis that they find themselves starting on the front row of the grid. So you can see these live pictures inside the Prima Pramac Ducati garage. You can clearly see there the strapped up and bandaged left thumb. for Jorge Martin. This is him on X recently. Pole, for those who have asked yesterday in my room, I cut my finger. Well, it was actually his thumb. Today I woke up and it was worse than I expected. Thanks to my medical team, we'll give 100% in the Tissot Sprint. Tissot Sprint, of course, is where Jorge Martin really does shine. He's been the superstar of the sprint since the new era kicked off in Portimao last year. And under glorious clear blue skies, on a blazing sunshine here in Spielberg, it's Matt Burt and Lewis Suddaby in the commentary box to talk you all through the nail-biting 14 laps coming our way. Simon Crafar down in pit lane. Lewis, a sensational record-breaking lap by Martin. What a front row, what a prospect we have in store, not just for the sprint coming up in about 20 minutes time, but also for the full feature 28-lap Grand Prix of Austria tomorrow. Martin, Bagnaia, Marquez, your front row. Doesn't really get much better than that.
A heavyweight front row. The first time that particular trio have shared the front row of a MotoGP grid so far this year. If you said to Pecco Bagnaia this morning, in fact, Jack Appleyard said this to him, surely you must have thought when you said a 1:27.889 that was pole position. And I think Bagnaia believed it had been until he realised that Jorge Martin had already said a 1:27.748. The pace continues to hot up in MotoGP. Just 3 points separates the top two in the World Championship, which means that there is the possibility of that World Championship lead swapping hands once again today. If Pecco Bagnaia wins this Tissot Sprint, he will regain the World Championship lead from Jorge Martin, although he is in Martin territory. He loves the sprint.
Saturday in Spielberg has been so far so good for Australian Jack Miller. 10th this morning, that was a good early marker, and he's qualified his equal best of the season. 5th on the grid, he leads the Pierra Mobility Group charge on the Red Bull KTM Factory Racing machine. Pol Espargaro, the wildcard on a very radically new looking RC16, goes from 10th. Brad Binder, the third of the Red Bull KTM riders in this morning's Q2 session, well, he was last, unfortunately. He goes from 12th place on the grid. Here's your world champion then, who did the dream double here in Austria 1 year ago. Second, well, he's qualified second now in 5 of the last 7 Grand Prix. Has Pecco Bagnaia. 7 Sunday podiums in a row, could equal his best run of 8 in a row here tomorrow. 43rd MotoGP podium last time out at the British Grand Prix. So now the most successful Ducati rider in terms of wins and podiums. And fair to say, Lewis, it has been a very topsy-turvy, up and down weekend in the Styria Mountains for our rookie sensation Pedro Acosta. A unique experience for him on Sprint Saturdays. First time today, he missed out on a place in Q2. 3 crashes. He's just had about everything thrown at him so far this weekend. Yeah,
he took the term an up and down weekend a little too literally, because he's been down on 3 occasions already. Picked himself back up though, as you say, from that 300km/h crash down in the approach to turn 4 yesterday morning. It was one of 2 crashes that he had in free practice 1. That ultimately put him on his back foot and contributed to him finding himself in that qualifying 1 session, which of course featured 4 KTMs, with Pol Espargaro joining us as a wildcard this weekend. And Pol was one of the riders that contributed to Acosta missing Q2. It was Pol Espargaro in the end, along with Jack Miller, that came through that Q1 session. Acosta only missed out by a matter of hundredths of a second, but those are the fine margins between potentially challenging for a place on the front 2 rows and where Pedro Acosta finds himself in P14.
Yeah, paying for the lost track time as well in terms of the setup and getting himself confident and comfortable in the MotoGP bike around Spielberg for the first time. Well, this rider was utterly unstoppable, wasn't he, 2 weeks ago at the British Grand Prix in Silverstone. Enea Bastianini becoming the 8th different rider to win in the sprint era, and he went on to complete a glorious double. 7th on the grid though goes the beast. He's just been sort of on the fringes of that top 6 all weekend, with actually out of a breaking into it, but we know how good the beast is at time management. Of course, he was one of several fallers in the chicane yesterday. 6th time though this year in 11 Grand Prix, he finds himself on the 3rd row or lower, qualifying once again, proving something of a headache for the Italian.
Yeah, and if he was able to get a grip on his qualifying, then we'd be talking in much more serious terms than we already are about Enea Bastianini challenging for this MotoGP World Championship this season. He comes into this sprint 49 points behind World Championship leader Jorge Martin, and you'd imagine that gap may grow given how strong Martin is in the sprints, but all you need to do is just look through the gap in Jorge Martin's visor, and the look on his face as that glove is applied to his left hand, it's a picture of agony in the eyes of Jorge Martin. He is going to have to grit his teeth over the upcoming 14 laps.
Well, we said it was a case of no pain, no gain for him in qualifying this morning, and he did bear the pain, and there was quite a lot of gain. His 5th pole position of the season, Ducati's 5th in a row here at the Spielberg circuit. They are going to take some beating, aren't they? Ducati's golden record, surely it will be protected in the sprint and the Grand Prix here tomorrow with that all-star front row. Martin Bagnaia and Marquez, as Martin then leaves the pit lane, grimacing in pain. It will be a long 42 race laps he's got coming up this afternoon, then 28 tomorrow here around Spielberg. Out of pit lane he goes. Looks like, thankfully, the forecasts have been correct. We know it can be pretty unpredictable, pretty temperamental in this part of Austria. Of course, in the heart of the Styrian Mountains, it looks like we're going to be fair set for a dry sprint, but there are a few somewhat dodgy forecasts around for race day tomorrow. 40-50% chance of rain at some point, so the riders have been doing a lot of flag-to-flag bike swap practices so far this weekend, and I'd imagine from 12th on the grid, back of the 4th row, Brad Binder might be doing a rain dance in his motorhome at some point tonight.
Yeah, he did not get qualifying 2 right at all, although if you'd have gone back 24 hours, or certainly back 1 year, a 128.9 would have been considered a very, very fast lap time in MotoGP. Nowadays, that's 1.2 seconds from pole position. Pecco Bagnaia crawling at a rather sedate pace as they try and save every last drop of fuel they can on the way to the grid. Of course, we saw Pecco Bagnaia grind to a halt at the end of qualifying 2 earlier on this morning. So 2nd on the grid for Pecco Bagnaia, 7th for Enea Bastianini. Let's get some pre-sprint thoughts from Davide Tardozzi of Ducati, who's with Simon on the grid.
He is. Always good to hear your thoughts, Davide. What are they going into today's sprint?
Yeah, there is an issue for a lot of riders of fuel consumption, who will be forced to have a kind of map B with means less power. So this is something that I think at the end of the race.
One other thing or two, our tyres, like front tyre temperature, but rear tyre consumption or drop.
No, I don't think that it will be problems. I think that both tire, medium and soft can perform in the same way. We saw this morning Marc Marquez with 17 laps doing very well, while with more than 20 Martin did with the medium a fantastic lap time. So I think that is not a matter of consumption, it's a matter of stability. So we'll see. That is a choice towards the riding style.
Thank you, Davide.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Ducati boss Davide Tardozzi. Yeah, this morning from Jorge Martin, we saw the fastest ever lap of Spielberg, and on this warm-up lap, the sighting lap, we're seeing the slowest laps you'll ever see here in Spielberg as all the riders go into fuel-saving mode as they come to the grid, as we're, about 12 and a half minutes away from lights out for this 14-lap Tissot sprint. Great to see 9 times world champion, the legend, the GOAT, Valentino Rossi here, supporting, sadly, only Marco Bezzecchi in this Tissot sprint and the Grand Prix tomorrow. Fabio Di Giannantonio, Lewis, sadly ruled out a heavy crash going through the high-speed turn 8 yesterday, and unfortunately unfit for the remainder of the weekend.
Yeah, not a good 24 hours that for Fabio Di Giannantonio, who was delayed arriving here in Austria on Thursday. His flight got cancelled on him, which left him a late arrival on Thursday afternoon, and then, yeah, 24 hours later, he suffered that big crash coming through turn 8. Not a corner that you see many crashes at, particularly not in that particular manner. Fast crash, as you mentioned, for Fabio Di Giannantonio, and the dislocated shoulder rules him out of this Austrian Grand Prix. As he said to Jack in free practice 2 this morning, the first time in his career he's actually had to withdraw from a Grand Prix and miss one due to injury. So an unfamiliar feeling for the in-form Fabio Di Giannantonio, who put in another fine performance at Silverstone to finish in 5th place. We wish him well on his recovery from injury.
Just a very quick bit of housekeeping, because we still do have 24 riders set to start the sprint and the Grand Prix tomorrow. The grid switch well by the appearances of HRC test rider Stefan Bradl, Aprilia test rider Lorenzo Savadori, and of course Pol Espargaro wildcarding for the factory KTM team.
Here's the grid. Martin, Bagnaia and Marquez on the front row together for the first time this year. Aleix Espargaro, Jack Miller and Maverick Vinales on the second row. Miller, the only rider we can see on the medium rear tyre. Pol Espargaro and Brad Binder also in the medium rear for KTM. They start 10th and 12th. Pedro Acosta also following. It's the KTMs on the medium rear with Augusto Fernandez completing that particular quintet. Leading Honda on the grid is Johann Zarco in 17th. We find Alex Rins in 21st, the only non-KTM on the grid on that medium rear tyre on our grid of 24.
Starting from pole position then, for the first time since the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez, will be Marc Marquez on the Gresini racing machine. Let's go down and get the thoughts of the boss, Michele Massini, who's with Simon.
Michele, front row. Mark put amazing effort up, all on his own, did an amazing lap. Not good enough to beat those GP24s, but now is when the points, are up for grab. Think, what's possible?
Far, it has been a good weekend so far. The pace and the feeling was really good. The important to start in the front row is, I think it's crucial for fight with the GP24. So let's see how we can manage this race.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
He has got it all on, Asdi. Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Michele Massini. What a big task. Almost a thankless task, you feel at times, for Marc Marquez to get on par with the GP24s ahead of him in the hands of this young man, Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia. Just for clarification, this is the third time this year that Marc Marquez has qualified on the front row of the grid, of course. It will be the fourth time he started from the front row. He was pushed up, of course, to start third on the grid in Mugello after Pecco Bagnaia was given his penalty. But this is the third race where he's qualified on the front row at the end of Q2. Jack Miller then, the shining light for the home manufacturer KTM, 5th place on the grid, his best since round 2 in Portimao. Pol Espargaro goes from the 4th row, as does Brad Binder. One of the KTM hopes in this sprint. Let's get the thoughts of their boss, Pit Beirer, who's with Simon.
He is. Pit. Jack putting up a great fight in qualifying. I'm really curious, what do you think all your riders are capable of today?
Well, I mean, we did quite many mistakes during yesterday and today. We saw so many positive things, and but we just need to combine it. We can see it with Jack. We are there. He's now in the 5th position, and I really believe he can do something out of it. But also the other boys should have a great race speed. I think, I know it's not enough for Pecco and Jorge. They are riding in a different level, but like in that next mix we should be there. We could be there. So I believe in our boys.
That development bike Pol's riding looks promising.
Yes, I mean it's still an early stage of a project, but the test team, Dani, Paul, they did a great job, and I mean you could see that even for Paul it was even, let's say, quite easy to do lap times on that bike. He couldn't also put things together, but that's really looking good for the future, or especially the outlook to next year. But today we are here in Spielberg, so let's perform today.
Thanks, Pit. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. Thanks to Pit Beirer. Yeah, Pol Espargaro wildcarding here this weekend. Dani Pedrosa, we just saw there on the grid, still doing so much sterling work behind the scenes as one of their star-studded test team. Pedrosa keeping a very close eye on the fortunes of Pol Espargaro. He would have cut some laps around here himself on that development machine. Brad Binder on 43 times, the last 5 he's starting from outside of the top 10. Still podiumless since our opening night, which feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? Double 2nd place in the sprint in Qatar and the Grand Prix, and winless, of course, in a Grand Prix since that famous battle here when he won in the rain on slicks back in 2021.
You saw Marc Marquez there walking back onto the grid, and you can see quite the atmosphere awaits him when he returns there. Of course, doesn't need to be reminded by us that he has never won at the Red Bull Ring. Of course, we've yet to see Marc Marquez win a Tissot Sprint either, so he could potentially end both of those particular weights here today. And you surely were expecting Marc Marquez to go on the attack early on here. Of course, given that opportunity to start from the front row of the grid, an opportunity he earned in qualifying this morning at the expense of Aleix Espargaro, surely Marc Marquez will try and disrupt the two title frontrunners in the early going.
Enjoying some pre-sprint shade is Aussie Jack Miller, but hoping to grab some of the limelight coming up very, very shortly. In this 14-lapper is the Australian. No official confirmation as yet about what he's up to in 2025, but it's all pointing towards a last-minute lifeline for Miller, of course, jettisoned by Red Bull KTM. No place at the inn for him there next year, but Pramac Yamaha have come knocking, and his mood certainly more upbeat than it was at the British Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, where it looked like 2024 for the time being was going to be his farewell in the MotoGP World Championship. Can Marquez then pick a fight with the GP24s? He starts alongside on the front row of the grid. The gap 0.4 of a second between Bagnaia and Marquez, just an indication of the supremacy, the current domination of Martin and Bagnaia in this year's World Championship. The gap between Bagnaia and Marquez, between second and third on the grid, is the biggest in a dry qualifying since Austin back in 2017, where nearly 0.7 of a second split Maverick Vinales and Valentino Rossi. Lewis, an incredible stat. Thanks to, they know who they are watching at home who gave it to me. I can't take the credit for it, but it just gives you the perfect indication that at the moment, as Pit Beirer said, Martin and Bagnaia are operating and riding on a totally different level.
Yeah, not only are they riding so good at the moment, but that GP24 is such a refined motorcycle. There are very few, if any, weaknesses with the GP24. The GP23 was already a sensational bike as it is. Of course, it won the World Championship, and Marc Marquez is on the front row of the grid on it, but they have moved the game on even further with that GP24, and Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia are making full use of it. They are our two leading title contenders, and here Bastianini and Marc Marquez on the fringes looking to force their way into contention, but it's a 3-point gap between Martin and Bagnaia, who will lead the World Championship into tomorrow's Austrian Grand Prix.
You could just see there that shot of Jorge Martin as he bats to get the gloves on, and hopefully gloves off for the battle shortly in this Tissot sprint. There was just a little bit of blood that started seeping through the bandage and the strapping on that left thumb. Obviously, when he suffered the incident in the shower in his motorhome last night, he wasn't too concerned about it, but woke up and the condition of the thumb was much worse than what he expected, as the safety car then peels away under the clear blue skies here in Spielberg. You can see the grid now starting to clear. Martin then on the head of the front row after a truly unbelievable performance once again to head qualifying two. The 26-year-old Spaniard's 19th MotoGP pole position. Marc Marquez then leads this star-studded front row here in what we hope will be a Spielberg blockbuster in this 14-lap Tissot sprint. Marquez then goes from third. Pecco Bagnaia, the world champion, is second. Can he make it back-to-back double wins here in Spielberg? But firing away from pole position with his damaged thumb, it's world championship leader Jorge Martin.